Alright, we're starting this one a little bit weirdly with an update and an addendum because parts of this video won't make sense without it. If you don't care about that and just want to get into the video proper, please go to the timestamp on the screen. So how about November's video being released in January, huh? Well, I completed the first game segment in November, and the second game's in December after a lot of writing frustrations. And I do explain that part in video itself. But the entirety of that video is phrased as if it's going to be released in December or at the end of 2024 otherwise. But in an extreme stroke of misfortune, well, let me tell you something. If you want to wind up severely ill, airports and airplanes are the perfect place to do that. One little Christmas trip to Southern California was enough to knock me on my ass for 2 weeks. And I kind of had to play catch up too, and unfortunately right now, this is a hobby. But obviously, since you're watching this is complete. And I'm working on the next video as well as I do the voiceover for this addendum. While I have no idea if this video is good or if it's the epitome of sunk cost fallacy, well, either way, if I want to grow, I've gotta fuck up in order to have experiences to learn from. But I will personally hope that you enjoy the video. So an idea I've had kicking about for a while is to, well, revisit games that I played as a stupid kid with too many emulators. Whereas now, I'm a stupid adult with too many emulators and too many hardware setups. And don't get me wrong, I do want to use those more often when I'm a bit more settled. But the more I think about those years, the more I realize that they impacted my taste quite heavily. In fact, those times are a big part of why I'm willing to go out of my comfort zone for games. So I do want to acknowledge that period of my life, and most of these games were already in English or now have translations. And I want to start with a game that I was honestly curious to see how it still holds up, and if it's still good or not. But before we get to Golden Sun, let's talk about the company that made it, Camelot. Nowadays, you might know Camelot as a developer as, well, being stuck in the Mario sports mines. A sort of fate that has befallen many companies, but admittedly, Mario Sports is better than being stuck with Call of Duty. However, the more important game to the video today is Shining Force. And honestly, I only noticed this after beginning to record footage for today's game that Shining Force and this game share a lot of presentation DNA. It's not Beyond the Beyond for the 5 of you who would want that game, but it's Golden Sun instead. But I kind of do want you to be afflicted by the same can't unsee brainworms that I am with regards to the similarities in presentation, and I do consider Golden Sun to be an evolution of this presentation. I know I'm showing assorted clips, but they're just little things to keep in mind as I go through this game, and for the record, I'm doing the first game and the Lost Stage. I don't like talking about underwhelming or terrible franchise killers, so we're not touching Dark Dawn with a 10-foot pole here. Golden Sun opens with, well, a landslide. A landslide that is obviously important to later plot points. But let's not beat around the bush. This section is a giant tutorial. More specifically on navigation and battles, though in a very simplified version. The mechanics at the purest level are a typical turn-based RPG through and through. You plan things out, press the buttons, and watch everything play out. But any RPG does have to have a plot, and Golden Suns does begin with the landslide, as well as the fact that, well, the village of Vale is going through what I would like to call a lesser Pompeii. The volcano that Vale is situated next to has just erupted and a bunch of boulders are falling towards the village. As kids, your protagonist Isaac and his best friend Garrett are trying to evacuate the village. They run into their friend Jenna, whose brother Felix is clinging for life in a river. Isaac and Garrett are sent to go get help, but... well, everything goes wrong, and not only Felix, but Jenna's whole family and Isaac's father gets washed away. And when Isaac and Garrett go to get more help, well, they kind of get knocked out by two suspicious people that seem like they may have set off this chain of events. And then it skips to 3 years later where the characters I've named so far go to visit the Scholar Kraden. But this is still an introduction, the calm before the storm, so let's lay a few more things out before we proceed. While I mentioned the earlier Shining games and the fact that a lot of the quirks are shared here, such as more physical interactions despite the limited hardware, with sprites doing things such as bobbing a little bit and nodding, there being a level of more limited physicality with characters than other games use. This game uses the hell out of two rather divisive things. The first of these is dithering. Dithering is effectively a technique used to force quote-unquote dirty displays like CRTs into displaying more colors than a console would otherwise be able to. In a 16-bit game, or in this case a 32-bit game, that you see dot patterns within graphics that seem weird and out of place, it's usually for the sake of dithering. But in the case of Golden Sun, the fact that there are dithering patterns within graphics is more down to how it draws its sprites. Dithering is a little trick from the 16 and 32-bit era in which you basically make a model, then effectively take shots of that model, and bam, there's your sprite. It's a bit of a controversial thing, but for the sake of this video, Golden Sun uses the hell out of pre-rendering. And given the fact that this game was made for the original Game Boy Advance display, you know, the one with no backlight and with a total resolution of a whopping 240 by 160 pixels, with that all in mind, it gets the job done and excellently so, but if you take modern things into account, like say, Game Boy interface for hardware and emulators for most people, it's gonna look a little bit weird and chunky. Well, the suspicious duo from one cutscene earlier wind up there, and Kraden basically ropes the party into going and sneaking into Soul Sanctum, a supposedly holy-ish sort of place within Mount Elif, that volcano that erupted. After some good old-fashioned lying, the adventure properly begins at Soul Sanctum. From this point onwards in the video, this mark right here indicates that I have not used a walkthrough. I will be using a map, as physical copies of the game did come with one, and that will not be counted as a walkthrough, but I will be missing optional things in this video. Sorry. Honestly, Soul Sanctum is a pretty good intro dungeon. Combined with the intro cutscene, it teaches you about the synergy move, basically a field action in this case. While you can move things manually, you have to use synergy in order to move something that's just out of reach. It does mean a lot of menu flipping, but it could honestly be worse. Also, during the final puzzle of the dungeon, which involves pushing 4 angel statues in order to change the light patterns on the floor, you do get introduced to the Synergy Stone, a one-time use item that'll fully charge up your synergy points. Even if you do get synergy point restoring items later on, having the ability to, say, fill it up completely in the middle of a puzzle is pretty important. Regardless, when they make it into the inner part of Soul Sanctum, they find elemental stars. Effectively, shiny big ol' balls full of elemental energy. And in an early game plot twist, Felix appears, working for the two shady people, Satros and Minardi. I didn't capture this specific interaction, but pretty much he holds Jenna and Kraden hostage. grab the elemental stars and they'll be released. Once Isaac and Garrett grab the 4th star, everything obviously goes to hell in a handbasket. A one-eyed giant floating rock basically bails them out, tells them that the lighthouses must remain unlit, and basically tells them to get out of Dodge before the place collapses. Once back at Vale, they get chastised, but everything also becomes clear. Isaac needs to stop the 4 elemental lighthouses from becoming lit, lest the world be driven to ruin. And as big ol' one-eyed rock appeared to them, or as the village calls it, the wise one, then good luck, kids! That's your job now. And once outside the village, oh my goodness, it's so baby. So these little creatures here, Djinn, are the most important thing in the game. Stacking them allows you to change class, which is very minor. It's just a stat bump and more synergy to use. Where it becomes more involved is that each Djinn has a one-time use skill that the equipped character can use. Using these skills, or unsetting them from the menu, then lets you unleash said Djinn, which is basically summoning. The more you unleash, the bigger the entity you could sick on your enemies. This little fellow right here is the Earth-aligned Venus Djinn, or to use the singular form, Venus Djinny. Fuck it, let's rank them. The Venus Djinn is big, round, and perfectly squimshable. S tier, baby. Wind-aligned Jupiter Djinn aren't exactly as squimshy looking, but they're still pretty round. And they're flappy, and that's adorable. A tier, baby. I mean, the water-aligned Mercury Djinn is fine. I mean, the tail's pretty nice. I guess I can call it a B tier baby creature. Okay, the fire-aligned Mars Djinn is just a toasty, fucked-up weasel. C tier, and that's being generous. Though, I will admit that there's a lot that the tutorial, as in-depth as you can all clearly see it is, doesn't tell you. For most of the game, and the sequel, you could just stack like element on like element and be good for like, I'd say, 80 to 90% of the game, but we will recross this bridge when it comes up proper, just to give you, the viewer, a little bit more of an authentic experience. In addition, let's use this as our spoiler cutoff point. We're early in the game, and this is an older game, and sometimes my relationship with spoilers can be a little bit weird, but I plan to spoil this game rotten as I re-experienced it. This is your one and only warning, so don't say I didn't warn you. We good? Let's continue. Well, on the probably less jittery on proper hardware world map, one can see a bunch of merchants running out in caravans and, well, having to turn around because the eruption took out the bridge. But in true RPG fashion, the small town of Alt is the first real area of the game. More importantly is this guy, Ivan. Ivan's a Jupiter adept that gives you access to a key field synergy mechanic. Mind reading. You have to be standing next to the person, but hey, it works as advertised. Also, Ivan is kind of the squishy mage stereotype. I recorded a lot of my footage with friends and sometimes my dinguses. But during recording, due to the fact that he is going to die a lot, the most common thing for me to seemingly blurt out of nowhere was, "Ivan, you bitch!" This place is kind of like a playground to get you used to mind reading, since that's kind of Ivan's key mechanic and he kinda wants to get the rod that he lost from his adoptive father back. The answer, of course, is the very shifty guys with the weird gaudy color palette, because of course it is. There is a small minigame meant to hammer in the fact that you're supposed to be standing next to the person whenever you use Mind Read, but all it says is that, hey, it's somewhere in this inn. Well, you beat the trio of thieves up, which, that's gotta be interesting to witness from the receiving end. Like, how much of that fight would non-adepts even perceive? Because canonically, they can't entirely perceive the entirety of synergy, so... Blah. And once the thieves are thrown in the slammer, well, Ivan gets his rod back and leaves the party. Until he rejoins, because he couldn't get into Lumpa, the thieves' town that his adoptive father got into. So he just joins you right outside of Goma Cave to introduce the fact that he is in fact a windy boy. So at this point, the squishy mage stays with you for the rest of the game. Yay. Goma Cave is such a nothing burger that I'm pretty sure this is all the footage I have of it. I mean, I guess you get a Mars Ginny here? The next town, Bilibin, introduces us to a staple of RPGs, G-rated body horror. Don't worry, it's just trees, nothing to bark about. More importantly, a lot of these towns implore you to explore in order to find things. Not like typical RPG kleptomania, although there is a little bit of that, but... Case in point, here's a little flappy Djinn baby just hiding away. Usually the game will let you see these Djinn from another angle first before leaving you to explore as well. Despite knowing nothing but apparent tree curse, well, the clear course of action here is to petition the Lord to deal with it, who at first approves of it, then looks at the party of blonde dingus, red-headed muscle monkey, and very squishy death-prone mage and says, no, I'm not sending these kids to die. The guard that brought you in does let you know that, hey, if you're really that persistent, you might not need a key to get past the barricade. If you're stumped, just remember that you can always grab things just a little out of reach and push them around. And yes, I intend to continue tree puns. Sorry. What am I talking about? I'm not sorry. Upon reaching the cursed town of Kolima, it turns out that sometimes adepts can be protected from abnormal elements from, well, their synergy. So things won't be quite so dull and wooden for the party, but... It turns out that it's a sentient tree that cursed the village. And the tree is fucking dying. And once the tree dies, the whole forest dies, which means everyone cursed into a tree fucking dies. Because we've gotta add some death stakes into our G-rated body horror. More importantly, though, here's an adorable little squishy potato baby here. Man, why are Venus Djinn just adorable? But the first half of Kolima Forest is a tedious log puzzle that I was not on a roll with when I was re-recording it. The inside of Tret, though, is just a lot of hopping puzzles, and it occurs to me that I have run out of wood puns for now. Unfortunately, with regard to those, I only have myself to extend a branch to. But the really cool stuff happens when you face your first proper boss in the game, Tret himself, or his floating head, I guess. I hope you're ready for some awesome music. While I'm not a fan of how the Game Boy Advance handles music, I've gotta say, Golden Sun's music is phenomenal, and the boss theme is probably the first track that really stands out. And it's not a very dense track either, if you can't tell by the per-channel layout I've put up here. The composer in this case is Motoi Sakuraba, who's been in the industry for quite a long time and is most known for his music for the Tales of series. Honestly, I'm kinda tempted to just swap out music with other Sakuraba games and see how many people notice. But his work for Golden Sun is phenomenal, especially since GBA sound was tricky in the day due to the fact that you kind of have to deal with only software-driven channels. Since this was past the area where the big thing was integrated sound chips, and before streamed audio files became the end-all norm in anything other than dedicated consoles and PC games, it should be noted that the Game Boy Advance does have the Game Boy chip, especially for backwards compatibility, but Golden Sun mostly uses that for sound effects. So, yeah, I dig this game and its sequel's music. Tret's too weak to undo the curse, but if you mind read the Lady Tree, she does say something about a Mercury Lighthouse, so that looks like the next destination. If you think I'm going to use this to switch over to water puns, then you can call me a
Big Drip.
But there's a town right next to the Mercury Lighthouse, Imel. And in RPG tradition, everything's going wrong everywhere, and Imel is no exception. There's a mystery plague there. And everything's pretty much hanging on by one single healer, who promptly scrambles off at seeing the lighthouse emit light. Luckily for the player, convincing Mia to join your party is as simple as moving 2 statues out of the way. And of course, since Mercury in this game represents water, a lot of the puzzles in this lighthouse are water-based. Rolling pipes, gaining the ability to briefly skip on water, going behind waterfalls, and speaking of the last one, here's a baby behind a waterfall. The climax of the dungeon has the lighthouse already being lit, and, well, one of the two, Satros, wanting to duke it out with ya. And yeah, it's time for another banger. Satros is very much a wake-up boss. Very fitting for the first adept you fight, as well as very fitting for the person that, well, kicked your ass all those years ago. You're being Isaac in this case. A lot of heavy hits here, as well as the fact that you're really gonna start getting Ivan deaths here. Even Mia, the cleric of the group, has more HP than Ivan. But you get to do this all while listening to the best banger of a battle theme in the entire game, that is to say, the first game. Anyone who knows anything about this game, even if you haven't played it, likely knows about this track and just how good it is. Like, holy shit, Sakuraba, calm down. You only get to hear this track once in this game, even if it's the first challenging fight here. Also, while I'm at it... Of course, because this is the first time you fought major villains, it just has to be that the lighthouse depowered Satros. With good old Pokemon-approved logic of water weakening fire, one of the other villains, Alex, just asks, "Hey, you still got the Mars star? Good, buddy." In addition, since the Venus Lighthouse is lit, the Hermes water, which is a cure-all, flows again. Narrative-wise, I love this. It's a subtle little hint that maybe you're wrong on your quest. On the other hand, Tret the Living Tree needs this water to be healed, which means another trek through Kolima Forest. Kolima is fucking annoying. The first time you got the back-to-back dungeons with both Kolima and Tret himself, but there's good fucking reason I don't have much footage of it, cause that log rolling puzzle is really annoying and you've gotta do it a second time. Regardless, the party cures Tret, gets plot exposition about the fact that synergy stones are changing people and beings, even non-human ones. And the other tree also points the party in the direction that they should go next. And with that, I never have to go to Kolima Forest again, and I am so happy about it. Regardless, it's time to report to the Lord that refused your help, get a pitiful reward that I admittedly safe-scummed on. Luckily, the path to the bridge is pretty well telegraphed, actually. If you had gone there earlier, the guy that operates the bridge, well, he was a tree. So that's pretty much your, hey, go solve the issues of the world buffer right there. However, you're more likely to stumble across the Fuin Temple than you are the forest you need to go to the temple in order to get the thing to go through the forest. Anyways, there is an aspect of this temple and some other later areas that I do unironically like. And that's the fact that there are more limited adepts in the world even before the incident at Mount Aleph. But they don't know the words adept, synergy, and so forth, instead taking just the appearance of monks, when what they've been training for is to become adepts of a sort. Sure, this is the equivalent of a filler arc, but hey, it's a bit of world building that I actually really appreciate from this game and the sequel. I do kind of like the dungeon as well. It's just a greatest hits of what you've experienced so far, but you do get to kick across logs, instead of rolling them the painful way that we don't talk about. But, more importantly, if you can't tell from the footage, as well as the fact that I saved right before it, there's a Flappy Baby here. All of the Djinn also have names that correspond to their element, so that's also a neat little touch. Yes, there's an Earth one named Salt. You're only going to use the thing you get from this place once, just to get through this forest. The only really important thing about this Lost Woods-ass forest is that it has a Venus Djinn here, and you know what? And that's reason enough to talk about it. You've gotta love those big chunky potato babies. They're the best Djinn in my opinion, and no, we're not arguing this. Also, while we're on this section of the game, look at this chunky monkey that's the boss. Djinn is the next town to go to, and admittedly I do get a little bit of an asshole chuckle out of the puzzle to get the Mercury Djinn. You have to bump into a woman that's carrying water, then freeze the water in order to platform across it. The things we sometimes have to do for very helpful baby creatures. I apologize, but I seem to have lied. You have to use the Force ability twice. Technically 3 times, but it's just to do the same thing again. And your reward is a to-do list. Feiji, one of the students at the temple, has wound up gaining clairvoyance as the result of a synergy stone smacking her in the head during the eruption day. All of her predictions come true, and if you were to say, leave Djinn and go to where she says she's going to the west, you'll find her wanting to rescue a man named Sue from, well, what she foresaw, the landslide in the area. While the game doesn't directly tell you, the way the map is structured will guide you to Altin, where you do need to go next. Really, it's just beating a bunch of suddenly animate statues into the ground to keep them from somehow spewing enough water to flood an entire village. I mean, it's okay. It's just a bunch of minecart puzzles, a bunch of using frost, and you know what? I'm even keeping Ivan alive. I wonder if... Also, the Mercury baby yearns for the mines, and I almost forgot to mention that. Luckily, Lift is a lot more useful than Force, but I don't know how exactly I feel about so many field abilities being tied to equipable items. I never run into any issues during either game, but it's still something that just sits at the back of my mind. And then it's off to Llama Temple, where you meet with the temple's master, Hama. Hama at Llama. That seems like it would be a tongue twister. It's a lot of plot dumping, but the gist of it is that, hey, Ivan's a Jupiter adept, and he needs to learn Reveal. You see, Jupiter adepts are pretty clairvoyant, and, well, that's also why Feiji can see the future. Hama was trying to train her, but it didn't really work until the Synergy Stone struck her on the head. At the least, you can use Reveal and Lift to take care of Sue's, currently being crushed by a boulder problem. Following that, Lamakan Desert is annoying. Just annoying. it's a lot of a single gimmick. Every time you walk on sands, you'll start to heat up, and your party will start griping and bitching at you. If you let the heat gauge build up entirely, you'll take a bit of damage whenever it overflows. And you have to use reveal to, well, reveal oases. Unfortunately, you could wind up revealing other things like treasures and enemies and so on and so forth, and it's just annoying. But this is almost at the halfway mark of the game, so yeah, that's fair. More importantly, though, here's a little flappy baby. You could take them home and love them. And it's on to Ivan's home, Calais, where Hamit's wife kind of bemoans the current situation and sets up for a side quest later on, but we'll get to that. The real purpose? Find a way across the sea to get to the Venus Lighthouse. The way to do that? Find a way to get to an event known as Colosso, which, given it's a short version of Colosseum, I'm pretty sure you can guess what that event is about. The only problem is that, well, the seas are unsafe, so you need to escort the ship. This results in the sort of puzzle that I'm 90% sure you would not know without a guide and the first bit of missed content on my end. Crew members will be attacked during this sequence, and you need to replace them with, well, civilians. The way to get to the game's secret area, Crossbone Isle, is to pick a very particular order of people, and there's no fucking way you're figuring this shit out on your own. As I'm doing voiceover for this, I still have no idea how the hell it calculates any of this, so yeah, let's just move on to Colosso itself. Tolby, the land where Colosso is held, has a lot of stuff to it, but most importantly, before Colosso, we must do...
Let's go gambling!
What the fuck kind of slots are these? I mean, I guess I can hold things, but this feels really weird. And this is what the tickets are for? I mean, at least this dice game is pretty consistent. Yeah, the Lucky Metal Fountain just seems to be the best overall. At least I'm getting useful stuff out of it, even if I fail. I guess these are the best pity prizes I've seen. Right, I should get back on track. Regardless, it's time to find out that the head of the city is missing through the power of eavesdropping. And apparently, he disappeared right in front of his aide's eyes. Find the guy inadvertently doing his best imitation of a chalk outline. Solve the little puzzle in order to get him his little I need this to live drink, which is really more of a life-prolonging drink called a Lemurian Draught, and that's more sequel territory than anything. Save the guy who pretty much tells you to go participate in Colosso because you saved his life, and that surely and utterly substitutes the proper trials, and he has no ulterior motives at all. The gist of Colosso is that, well, you gotta cheat. You gotta have your friends cheat for you and then puzzle your way through. After all, as many a great con artist would say, it's only cheating if you get caught, and if people can't see synergy, then I guess you can't cheat. But even with that, I kind of failed Colosso on the final fight. This doesn't have any plot impact though, because the city's lord, Bobby, will still cooperate with you, tell you about Adept, say that he is in fact Kraden's master, mentor, whatever, as well as info dump on stuff like Lemuria and alchemy, so on and so forth, and tell you that, yeah, he needs to find Lemuria again or his ass is dead. What does have an impact, though, is that, well, I forgot to grab the Vanished Gem from Bobby's shelf and forgot about it for the rest of the run, locking me out of an entire side quest. So no Lumpa raid for me. So you're basically sent through the desert to go investigate something called Mercury Lighthouse, and that's not the important part. But an important thing is this little Djinn baby here. And another one up here. But the actual entrance to Venus Lighthouse requires reveal. Wait, Shiva doesn't start with reveal in the next game. Huh. But it can also only be entered by adepts. And whoo lordy, are you ready for another banger alert? As much as I'd want to play the whole thing, I think 30 seconds of this Venus Lighthouse visualization is enough. Honestly, aside from one little problem, it's a damn good final dungeon for the game. It makes you use everything you've learned. This is a case of the less I have to say, the better it is, because it's just solid, but admittedly my problem with it is a matter of, personal taste. You see, each of the 4 lighthouses houses, oh gods, I made a pun, a Djinn that corresponds with its element. This also extends into the next game as well. But Venus Lighthouse is the exception, and it baffles me, because Mars Lighthouse, the last dungeon of the next game, has a Mars Djinn. While this fucking baffles me due to my own biases, I'm more perplexed because Venus Djinn are practically the de facto mascot of the game. Your first Djinni is always a Venus Djinn. And while the others are fine too, it just feels very, very weird that when it's finally time for Earth, there's no Venus Djinn to be found. I mean, what was keeping them from just adding another one in and just going something like, ah, fuck, we forgot to add a Djinn to the Venus Lighthouse. We should try to keep them all uniform, right? Here's one. We're gonna call it Squimpsh. And yes, there are unused Djinn in this game, and a lot of them got repurposed to be used in Golden Sun, the Lost Stage, the game we'll be covering next. But there are 2 of each Djinn that never went used in either game. Of all of the baffling things about this series of 2 games, this is the most baffling to me. Okay, that and the Synergy shortcut menu that got scrapped. Like, what the fuck? That would have been a lot easier than just opening the menu endlessly like we're in the 80s. Back to the plot. Basically, what Isaac and party try to do is bargain with Satros and Minority in order to guarantee Shiva's safety. Unsurprisingly, this backfires and the duo attacks them all. Honestly, 90% of this fight and the following fight is just Ivan drawing aggro and dying a lot, so it seems like my little gag has backfired on me, and let's just update that counter again. The upside is, at this point in the game, Isaac has revived, so I could pretty much just have Ivan draw aggro so that everyone else doesn't get hurt. But it was 10 minutes of Ivan just eating shit so everyone else can live. For this fight, not the final fight. See, whenever you defeat Satros and Minority, they get back up to, well, fuse into a dragon. Insert a polymerization joke here. Probably have a branded fusion somewhere for our more dragon-centric joke. Man, I should really go back to Yu-Gi-Oh! At some point. Oh, yeah, right, this was my only party wipe in this game against this dragon. After that, the lighthouse splits in 2 with the foundation crumbling, and Jesus Christ, Felix hops after Shiva from such a high height, god damn. I mean, I guess a wind and an earth adept would probably have the highest chance of surviving such a drop thanks to their abilities, but I can't top that. Like, all else that happens is just the party continues traveling because this is a cliffhanger meant to bridge games. Though of note is that before the next game, if you have anything you still need to do, you'll want to save your clear data to a different slot. See, Golden Sun 1 has a little feature that, in my infinite wisdom, I completely forgot to record, where you can input a button combo at the title screen and prepare to transfer your save data to the next game. In this case, this is why I emulated, because to do this on hardware would have required me to drag out my Game Boy player, would have required me to drag out a second Game Boy, would have required me to get the whole link cable shebang set up, or I could just use MGBA. There's another alternative, but it pretty much requires you typing in the password from hell. There are so many characters. Because see, the fucking password for bridging these two games has to account for everything. But I went the sane route, and I'm going to use this point in the video, if I may be just the slightest bit meta for a second, to transition into whatever I have planned for Golden Sun, The Lost Age. Look, I made the sections for Golden Sun 1 and The Lost Age at completely different times. I went into The Lost Age not remembering much about it and thinking it was more of the same. It both was and wasn't, and basically, I've had to completely overhaul this part of the video, completely gut the outline script I had planned for it, and ooh. So, let's start with this instead. Golden Sun: The Lost Age is probably one of the games I have the most extreme love and hate relationship that I've played with. It almost completely fucking broke me. See, with the first game, I compared it to Shining Force, because a lot of Camelot's earlier stuff was felt in that. And Shining Force is safe, but fun. But with The Lost Age, the comparison shifts away from that and to a Sierra adventure game. Alright, I'm probably confusing a lot of people. Well, at least anyone who's not either old as hell or doesn't play older games like I do. Let me explain, because for this one, instead of the plot, I'm going to be focusing more on the game itself and my problems with it. Sierra Online were a developer of video games back in the 80s and 90s. What they are most well known for is what I'm using for my comparison point here, their adventure games, which are on a really extreme sliding scale and are oftentimes loved, hated, or both. But they released quite a lot of them, so let me narrow my comparison point down even further. I often put Sierra games on a little bit of a sliding scale. There's games at the bottom of the barrel like Blue Boy Procedural Simulator Police Quest. The Lost Age is obviously not that bad. And obviously, given my love-hate statement, I don't think of this quite as highly as, say, the later Space Quest games. I think the best comparison is actually King's Quest games, for quite a few reasons. But, for time's sake, let's just stick to what I can draw comparisons towards The Lost Age with. The King's Quest series tried to be grand adventures with wide-open maps, zero direction, barely a plot, and just extremely obtuse. Despite being a different genre, Golden Sun: The Lost Age fits this description to a T. It does its best to paint an extremely diverse world, especially for the era it came out in. And in that specific regard, it succeeds. I fucking love the presentation of this game. I think it's sublime, and I don't think there's another GBA RPG that does it quite as well as this game. Even as I grew more frustrated, the thought of seeing what kind of locales I'd come across kinda kept me going to the end. A bit of it is sunk cost fallacy, mind you, but that's neither here nor there. In addition, whenever it's not a boss battle theme, the music in this game is even better, but I can't do the little per channel view thing given it played back quite a bit glitchily. There's also a lot of out-of-the-way stuff that rewards exploration on the map now, like alternative summons. The dungeon design as well is also excellent. They're all much larger than the first games, and, you know, a sequel to an RPG should do that. However, the game kind of has a fatal flaw that is why I see it in such a mixed way. The game kind of commits to being this giant world adventure by being non-linear with checkpoints. Unfortunately, this means you virtually have very little direction, and like a Sierra game, solutions often feel obtuse. And once you do start to plot around, you then realize that everything there is set up for world building and not plot. Unfortunately, what this means for me and what became the biggest challenge for the video is that 90% of my recorded footage was me wandering the world map, and everything is so disjointed that I can't piece together much very effectively. At least for the first half of the game. So what I'm going to do is present how I experienced the game through reading the thoughts part of the first outline for this section. In case a project takes me a while, I usually take some notes in order to note how I'm feeling about something at that time. This is those, dramatically overvoiced. Where the fuck am I going? I have cleared a single goddamn dungeon and gotten 2 goddamn squishy little babies. Where the fuck am I supposed to go now? I mean, I gotta free this Piers guy, but where the hell am I going? Oh gods, there's werewolves. I wonder how many people would be pissed off if I said that werewolves are furries. God damn, that was a pain in the ass to get to this Ayers Rock place. Ayers Rock. Australia mention! Oh, sweet Jesus, there's map Djinn and new alternate summons. No! Oh gods, how many Djinn did I miss in Golden Sun 1? Oh gods, it opens up even more. There's no fucking direction, and I have a ship now, and god damn it, I just want a squimch. Give me a Venus Djinn to cling into, please. How in the hell did you mistake Felix for Isaac? One has blonde hair, the other has brown, and Felix's is much longer. Did these little shit kids just give me the way to get into Lemuria? How the fuck was I supposed to find this? I fucking swear this game is just a giant fucking conspiracy to sell strategy guides. God damn. What do you mean Poseidon's invincible? I guess it's time to finally use a walkthrough. Bring out the hastily edited Nimble. I mean, going back to the first dungeon of the game isn't the worst thing in the world, but man, I wish this was telegraphed better. Damn it, Gaia Rock, I was so close to praising you, and then you pull this maze out. You're lucky I've got a walkthrough open. Dang, Flappy Baby's making me catch some hands. Dang, that pirate I ran into earlier just wound up running to Grandma. Man, that's pathetic. Congratulations! All of that pain and suffering is to get into Flat World Wayard's worst gated community, Lemuria! The problem with that little lapse in sanity is all those events are the greater half of the game. And while it does focus and become better thanks to that, it's too little too late. The remaining 3 to 4 areas, and, well, the dungeon count will depend on if you want to suffer through all the bonus content, but it's still very, very good, but it's just a little bit of a whimper for the adventure. What, you want the game's plot? I can give it to you in a few fucking sentences. Congrats, the world is dying, and Felix's party is right in that releasing the lighthouses is pretty much the only way the world will survive. Both parties combine forces, but it's not like you'll ever use your Golden Sun 1 party given that there's just so much more to the Lost Stage that your other party will be overleveled. Also, Djinn assignment will become a fucking nightmare, because now you have 8 people you all need to have the same amount of Djinn at all times. And congrats, the only other really important plot detail is that the entire thing was a 4D game of chess between the wise one and blue-haired pretty boy bastard Alex. I really wanted to like this one, but as you could tell, this one took a lot out of me, especially compared to the first game. The amount of world building and fleshing out all these characters is really good despite otherwise pretty safe tones. But the game design is obtuse, and the world building comes at the cost of the plot being threadbare. And Contigo and the like, as well as Prox and Mars Lighthouse and Magma Rock, just isn't enough. Truly, if you want to go through Golden Sun The Lost Stage, please just use a walkthrough. Because when I looked over the walkthrough one more time once I had a direction in which I wanted to take this segment, apparently, my sequence broke without even knowing it. I don't know, just the fact that it has such high strengths and low weaknesses has made me have such conflicting feelings on this, and I hope this suffices. And for the record, I don't want to touch Dark Dawn with a 10-foot pole. If I ever have to look at Dark Dawn, I'm just going to sigh. I did not play that game as a little shit with an emulator, so it does not qualify for a section like this, and I remember, even despite how Lost Age and Golden Sun 1 felt in my memory, being disappointed. But feelings about potentially being inadequate with its sequel aside, that's Golden Sun and The Lost Age. The Lost Stage aside, I still mostly enjoyed my time with it. There were enough positives in there to get me past the lowest points of The Lost Stage. They are absolutely worth playing if you get them for free or cheap, though do keep in mind that the GBA market is kind of saturated with bootlegs, and that's a whole conundrum in itself. But this is also the last video of 2024, and as of recording it, it's going to be released right before I head to Southern California on vacation, or when I get back. The difficulty with how to handle the Lost Age kind of ate into whatever time I would have had to make a December video proper, so sorry about that. I mean, I'm always doing work with Furnace, and, you know, maybe I'll have enough to make a small little vlog-type video while I'm in Southern California. Though, for anyone who knows, no, I don't have to endure LAX again. I wouldn't wish LAX on my worst enemies. So, I'll wish you all a nice holidays or a nice new year, depending on when this video releases. And I'll see you all in 2025. I do have plans for it, and hopefully I don't derail myself. See you then! I know, I'm supposed to be putting the outro here, but I just want to interrupt this for a second in editing. I want to thank you all for being so patient with me. I've got a lot planned for 2025, and I just hope production hell doesn't kick in some way. But I do kind of want to keep these addendums short, so let's just go to the outro now.